हेलो आदाब नमस्कार सत श्री अकाल थैंक यू सो मच फॉर joining us back on Nurture Life Talks. अगर आप पहली बार देख रहे हैं so here we meet very interesting people, talk to them, get to learn from them. And today my guest is a creative visionary who has redefined fashion with a bold eclectic style. She is known as the Queen of Kish, and she has collaborated with global icons like Lady Gaga, Nike, Swarovski, IKEA, Johnny Walker Blue Label, and Victoria and Albert Museum. From creating unique art installations for Vivanta Taj, Absolute, and Channel V to revolutionizing sustainable fashion, her work speaks of innovation and impact. Thank you so much, Nida, for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for taking out time for us.
Thank you, Aamir, for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
And I'm sure that we'll be learning a lot from you about your creative processes, your inspirations, and what your future vision for the future holds. So let's begin with the very basic. Take us back to your childhood. How did your early influences, how was, I mean, your upbringing and all that sparked your curiosity uh, into becoming a fashion designer?
Um, Interesting, actually. I never ever have a straightforward answer for this because I was actually a science student, and if
Mm-hmm.
my family had it their way, I would have been a doctor today, and I'm sure I would have made a lousy doctor because my heart wasn't in that space. So I was a science student. I was studying biology, but by the time I reached class 12, I was very sure that I didn't even want to take any medical entrance test exams. So I told my parents I don't want to do it. And my dad said, okay, what do you want to do? So I said, so interesting thing happened in class 12. I was going somewhere, this is on campus, and there was this boy from another section. He was carrying something, and
Mm-hmm.
I literally dropped it to him. And I said, what do you have in your hand? So he said, it's the prospectus to NIFT. And I had no idea what NIFT was back in the day at that point. So I said, what is NIFT? So he told me. And I said, that sounds good. And in my head, I thought, hey, that's what I want to do. And so I came back and I told my parents, I don't want to be a doctor. And I think I found what I want to do. So my dad said, if you can make it, sure, why not? But if you can't make it, then too bad. You're going to have to do what you're told to do. So I guess God has been very kind. I made it, and here I am, all these years down the road, a designer and not a doctor. So
So
I
that
think
was like destiny knocking at the door, right?
yes, yes, yes. I was always creative, so it's not like it came as a shock. But all those years
Mm-hmm.
ago, creative profession was not an option. People thought very lowly of anything outside of engineering or medicine or maybe law or an MBA. So
Right.
outside of these three, four choices, anything that you wanted to do was not really considered up to the mark or respectable. So a lot of my extended family tried their best to dissuade me, but my mind was made up. But I just related to that thing that I just got to know about, and I said, "This is exactly what I was looking for." So that's how it happened.
Brilliant. So uh, you've been dubbed as the Queen of Kitsch by the Indian media. So how did you find your unique style? I mean, you are not doing what everybody else is doing. You're doing something very different. How did you do that? And you went on to blend fashion, art, and design, and all that into a very electric way.
Um, I don't think that when you're doing something from your heart and when you're doing something that resonates with your soul, you don't have to make an effort, and it just flows. It just comes naturally. I've never made a conscious effort to do what I do. And the sort of design ideology I have, it's not like I went and I made a note and said, okay, I like this designer's work and I must do what he or she is doing. This is what just happened, and this is what I resonated with when I would sit down with a pen and paper or be looking for inspiration. I was
Mhm.
influenced a lot of interesting things that have to do with the Indian streets, the Indian culture, the colors, the you know iconoclastic imagery, the colloquialism, everything that has to do with street India. It sounded very exciting for me, and I was just naturally drawn to all of this. So there's never been an effort to try and push myself into a space where maybe people will talk about, or maybe it will be interesting enough for people to, sit up and look. This is who I am, and this is how it is.
Okay. So, but you have successfully integrated art into commercial fashion. And commercial fashion is one thing, and then introducing art into it and integrating it, rather. And that's not very easy to achieve. So, how do you maintain your artistic integrity while catering to a very broad market?
I think for me, design has always been art. My design philosophy, even when I was studying in NIFT, was always art translated. This was
Hmm.
a line which I read by an artist called Edward Munch. And in fact, I remember in the first year of NIFT, in the second semester, I was pretty sure that I wanted to just quit NIFT and go to Baroda School of Art. And for a long time, I was oscillating between the idea of whether or not to quit NIFT and go to study art professionally. But I think common sense
Mhm.
prevailed. I said that I should be able to integrate art if I want to. I mean, it's a very fluid industry where, if you know how to design, if you know how to draw inspiration, in my eyes, how hard do you think it would be to put that design on a garment or on a wallpaper or on a piece of furniture or anything else? So I think it just, again, coming back to the fact that it just came naturally to me. So from the beginning of my career, I think the trajectory always was that I deviated towards projects which had a lot to do with other things apart from fashion. So I've done a really interesting project with Nike where for a whole year. So this was at the end of the first year in my career as an independent designer. Nike
Mhm.
approached me. They said that the World Cup was coming to India, and they said they wanted somebody like me, or rather just me, um, because I understand the pulse of India from the standpoint of the soul of India. So they said they wanted me to create an entire campaign and help them understand, the Americans sitting in Portland, to understand what makes India move in terms of cricket. How is it? What does it mean? So cricket to us is a religion. It's a form of religion, and what happens to people when there is India playing? I mean, this is before 2020 began. So, there was a different kind of kid fever at that time. But anyway, point being that I think I just found a lot of openings to be able to express myself in many, many creative spheres other than fashion. And it just flowed because I honestly feel that when you relate to something from within, doors just open and lots of interesting things come into your life, and a lot of I mean, you shape your life in the manner that you would like yourself to see yourself living life if it is not forced.
True.
So
True.
design was not forced. It is really truly who I am. So therefore,
So you did actually went on to collaborate with Milind Soman for active lifestyle brand Devi and introduced some really groundbreaking sustainable fashion like this running sari made from plastic bottles. So that was very interesting. So what inspired you to venture into sustainable fashion now? Okay, I get it that you do whatever your heart feels like, but was there?
so the first part where I just make a little tweak. The running sari
Mhm.
is not made of plastic bottles, but
Okay.
the fabrics that we created were sustainable and they were made out of plastic bottles. So
Okay.
So we live in a world where if people like us are not aware and are not making a conscious effort uh, to go green or to be sustainable or to be organic, very soon the earth is going to end. So it's imperative that people in a position of a certain kind of influence should understand the value of sustainability. And I find myself in that space where if one has a voice, one should be able to influence people in a positive way. So, with that standpoint, Milind and I, we got together and we created a collection for this brand called Baby, wherein we made an entire athleisure collection, which was made out of um, fabric made out of plastic bottles and recycled plastic bottles, that is. And coming to the running sari, the idea was that we all know Milind Suman, and we know that he stands for um, great health, for running, for he stands up for a lot of health conversations. So we were discussing and we wanted to make people understand that exercise is very important. Sometimes you don't find time to exercise. Sometimes you just want to go out for a walk or maybe just for a quick run. So we wanted, and because he's a runner, he does a lot of marathons. You know that he's the Iron Man in India. So we felt that it was befitting to create a sari for women who don't
Mhm.
want to get into sporty clothes. Like the older women of our society don't feel comfortable wearing anything outside of a sari or maybe a shalwar kurta. So we created a sari which they could run in, and it was quite an interesting thing. And so, in fact, I remember on the show we had four different women who were in the age group of 90 plus. There was one of them that was 101 years old, and these wonderful ladies were so fit. They came and they ran on the ramp, and they also did a bit of yoga and exercise on the ramp. So it was just an amazing experience.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really awesome. That really shows us the mirror, couch potatoes. So anyway, you went on to collaborate with international brands and figures like Lady Gaga and Swarovski. You already mentioned Nike. So how's that, and what was that about?
So I think Lady Gaga was a very interesting experience. So there was this one
Hmm.
particular collection that I was making, and it was called the Great Indian Bohemian Tamasha. And I have a thing for interesting
The
names.
Great Indian.
Bohemian
I'm so
Tamasha.
sorry. Okay, okay, go ahead.
So
Right.
this was inspired by the Ram Leelas that happen in smaller
Uh-huh,
towns.
uh-huh.
Uh,
Right, right.
so I'm very inspired by Indian colloquialism, and I'm inspired by the authentic culture of our people. So I found this, the melas and the these kind of festivities to be very exciting. So we created this collection, and in this collection, I was making these two finale dresses. Now, finale dresses are
Hmm.
just avant-garde dresses, and I enjoy making them for my own joy. They're just art to wear. They're not necessarily wearable clothes, but they're just wearable art. So as these two conceptual garments, I was making them with 2,000 LED lights on them. And when we were making these dresses in the office, um, I would just look at them and I'd say, who's going to wear this? We have only a Lady Gaga in this world who would love to wear something like this. Otherwise, you normally don't get to see too many people wearing crazy clothes. Now, of course, times have changed. This was many years ago. And you have a lot of Indian actors and actresses and other people also wearing interesting out of the box clothes. But this was many years back. And I think again, the universe was just listening to me. And so Lady Gaga was coming to India for the F1 series,
Hmm.
the first time when F1 happened in India. They were coming to Delhi. And Red Chilies was sort of managing them in India. So Red Chilli's office called me up and they said that Lady Gaga is coming, and their stylists have picked me because I do stuff that she would love to wear, and so why don't I dress her? And that's how it happened. So that's how I ended up dressing her. I met her, had an interesting afternoon with her, and she absolutely loved it. So this dress was it was inspired by the Ram Leelas and how the typical art that you see, little posters that you see in the villages, which are very bright colored, and maybe it is a magician's show poster or some other poster like that from all those programs that happen in around Leela. So it was inspired by that art, and we put 2,000 LED lights on it, and they would blink in a circuit. And we had this huge Maharaja crown, which again is a very typical Ram Leela element. So we created this entire look, and she absolutely loved it.
I'm really intrigued. I mean, I'll go to the net and go on the net and check it out. I mean, that's really intriguing. So, and then you went on to collaborate with Absolute five for 5 times, more than 5 times.
Yes. So, see, now that is another one of the spaces which is outside of my fashion area. Um,
Uh-huh.
so Absolute is a company that does a lot of art, and they promote artists, and they like to be in an artistic space. So the first time when I collaborated with them, it was several years ago, where they came to me and they wanted to for me to make an installation, and there is something called Absolute Art. Now, Absolute Art is it's a series, and it's a series of shows, physical shows, and they also have they create coffee table books of the artists that have collaborated with them. Now, what happens is that they have this humongous, huge 10, 15 feet bottle shaped as an absolute bottle, and they give that to you, and they say, do whatever you can with it, whatever you want. Create art with Absolute. So that particular year, um, they came to India. It was their tour through India, and they picked Subodh Gupta, who is, of course, everybody knows who he is. He's one of the most famous Indian artists who has even placed his art at Christie's, etc. So so they picked him and they picked me for that tour. So I created something which was called Orto Cow, which means chaos in order, and order in chaos. And so we created a huge 20 feet bottle out of a lot of interesting elements which had to do with hardware. And it was quite an interesting project. And other than that, we've done a lot of others. We've done the Absolute Bottle, we've done something with Absolute Mode, we've done a lot of things. Recently, I did something else with them, wherein they said they wanted to, so they're all socially driven. These brands try to bring in a social element because, again, it's about somebody who has a voice and has the reach must be able to use their influence for positive change in the country or in the world. So Absolute does something like that as well. So they said that for Women's Day, they would like for me to create an interesting project, which would be inspiring not just for women but people in general. Because for a society to change, it's especially in a conversation which has to do with women. You can't just talk to women; you have to talk to the men. It is more important to talk to the men because without having to go into that side of the conversation, the world's going to change only the men if the men look at women differently in a better way, which means. So one needs to educate the men more than opening a woman's eyes, actually. So anyway, so I created a project where I found, as in we searched for interesting women, interesting stories of women who had done something very empowering, whose lives were empowering, not just in the sense of somebody who's opened an NGO, so they've given employment to 500 women or 200 women. That of course is a beautiful story, but there's a lot that has already been spoken about in that realm. We wanted to find women who have personally as their own selves been so inspiring that they can be their stories can be eye-opening for a lot of other women living in smaller towns or in in a society which is not open even today for women to learn or study beyond a certain point or to do something with their lives, and the men to understand that it's so important for women to be independent and be educated. So we found five beautiful women from different walks of life, and we created a project where um, we heard their stories out. I created a beautiful, well-written text for them to be able to speak their story in, because you have to make it concise. Today, in today's world, everything is about social media. Everybody's on a social media platform, whether it's a Facebook or it's an Instagram or Snapchat or any other. And the attention span of people is really short. So if you can talk to somebody in the first 3 seconds or 5 seconds, then they want to see what you're saying. Otherwise, it becomes boring. So, so creating content is a very large part of anyone's professional space today. So, keeping that in mind, we created their stories as short 30-second reels, 20-second reels, 15-second reels. And the storytelling was the entire concept. And the fact that, you can't just sit there and get somebody to just sit there and just talk. It has to be interesting. It has to be engaging. It has to have that really cool rhythm factor to it. So we created some beautiful content for them. And what I really enjoyed was that this was actually an international campaign. It was not just meant for India. It was meant for their entire international handle. So it came from Sweden. So I was very happy to be part of that
Beautiful.
collaboration.
Lovely. Okay. And your Lever Fabric collaboration with the Aditya Bulla Group, that has also brought out some really cool looking feminine collection. So, what drew you to Lever?
So again, that is also in the space of sustainability. Aditya Birla
Mm-hmm.
has an entire wing which only does sustainable fabrics. And when I say sustainability, their take on sustainability is different. Uh, they create man-made fibers which use lesser amount of water. So we know that there is paucity of water on the planet, and people are trying every method possible. Industries are trying every method possible to reuse water. So they create a lot of fibers which are man-made, and the consumption of water and reuse of water is part of their process. So they wanted to work with me and create a collection which was feminine, which was flowy, which had that that whole feeling of a woman, and also give out the message of using fabrics. Be aware of what kind of fabrics one is using, natural fibers, man-made fibers that are conducive for the environment, and which are good for the skin, for the beauty of the skin. So it was that sort of a project, which was also kind of very interesting. So yeah, that's what we did.
Okay. As far as art installations go, you collaborated to, you did art installations for Vivanta, Taj, and Channel V,
Yes, I've done a lot
right?
of art installations for different kinds of people.
Yeah.
For Taj Vivanta, it was actually that was a very interesting project where they said they wanted to create an interesting wedding. Uh, so usually when you think about a wedding, you only think about uh, a very formal kind of wedding, the same sort of decor elements which everybody else is using. So Vivanta wanted to break that mold, and they came to me and they said, "We want to do something which is really out of the box, which is really cool, which is inspired by India, but it's still modern and chic and edgy." So we ended up creating a few installations for the wedding decor, and we created the entire wedding. So again, this is also a project which is outside of fashion, where
Mhm.
I'm really excited, about designing spaces. I really enjoy space design, especially home decor. But even moving spaces are beautiful. So moving spaces like wedding is a very interesting space because you think of everything as a canvas, and you think of any project as an art project, and you look at different frames and you say what goes where and how can one element complement the other, and how can the same concept be utilized in terms of a print as well as in terms of an art installation or in terms of lighting. So we did a lot of very cool stuff with the lighting too, where we created a print which was especially designed for that wedding. So fabrics and the decor materials that we used in the wedding were all designed. And we also actually created a really beautiful invite. So it was like a big mason jar, and there was a scroll. Um, so we printed out the invite on the scroll, and we put it inside the jar. And there were very nicely made sweets, which were not the typical sweets that you normally get in a wedding with a wedding card, but
Mm-hmm.
created some really nice sweets based on the concept that we had. So overall, how we transcend boundaries when you're in a creative realm. The end product is very easy to create if you understand how to conceptualize and how to transfer the inspiration from one surface to the other. So I think this was one of those projects where we ended up doing a lot of different things.
So I think whenever you move around, your mind must be rushing all the time. Oh, we can do this here, we can do that here, this can probably look better like this. Is that so?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's a fun life. God is kind. There's a lot going on in life usually. And so, yeah, I mean, there are different kinds of projects going on all the time. So there's plenty of excitement. No 2 days are the same in my life, especially in terms of my work. Sometimes you're working on fashion, sometimes you're working on an interior project, sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm doing something else. So I'm doing research on chicken curry at the moment, so that is taking up a lot of my time. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
different things happening. So it's really about how you can apply your creative senses into different genres of art. So yeah, so life has a lot of fun things happening.
Okay. So who or what has been your biggest, inspiration or motivator, so as to say, in your career, in your life?
Um, I think I'm inspired by the idea of how there are so many people on this planet who are not just one thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
if, I mean, even if we talk about somebody like a Rabindranath Tagore, for example, he was an artist, he was a filmmaker, he was a writer, he was a painter, he did so many things. I remember when I was, for the first time, when I was going to take my NIFT entrance exam. No, I think I cleared my entrance exam. I was going for my interview and the situational test. And
Okay.
I made something like a portfolio uh, before I was, to go for the interview. And I was just thinking about these amazing people that are so inspiring. And I told myself that my epitaph is going to read so many amazing choices I made in life. I'm not just going to be that one boring person. I will do a lot of things with my life. So I think
Awesome.
I was
Yeah.
16 or 17 or something at that point. And I think it's interesting that I had that kind of clarity. And so I'm just living that life. That's it.
That's just an awesome philosophy. It's brilliant, actually. And since you mentioned it, I think it was only after the Industrial Revolution that we became so moronic that we started focusing on one thing. Earlier, I mean, you read about any of the scientists and people like that, and somebody was a doctor, and at the same time that person was an astronomer. At the same time, that person was a playwright, and I mean, they all wore so different hats. So at the same time, and then we came into this world where you had to be defined by one single thing. Okay, this is your profession. This defines you. That's it. That
Because
is
I'll tell you
that's good
why.
too.
I'll tell you two reasons. One is, of course, the commercial aspect of life that people are so scared and so bogged down that they feel, oh my God, I need to make this much money to be accepted by society. And it doesn't matter if I hate my job, but it has to get me this much money. They are drawn
Very
and
true.
driven by that. When you're driven by something so wrong, you will never do anything exciting with yourself. But when you're driven by passion, you do everything. And I've read this somewhere several times that choose to do what you will do for free for the rest of your life, and that if you do that, you will figure out how to make money out of it, because you'll be so happy doing what you do that you will figure out how to do it for the rest of your life. And if you're doing something for that much amount of time, you will know how to monetize it. So I feel that that is not taught to us in our educational systems. We have a very well, the Indian educational system is a very babu educational system. Sorry for using this term,
I know.
because we were
That's
only educated to become subordinates to the British, and no one has bothered to change the educational system. Nobody is bothered to upgrade it. We don't need that. We don't need to study trigonometry, for example. Why do I need to care about trigonometry? Only if I want to be a scientist would I be interested in that. So why am I not being taught how to educate myself on a spiritual level, or why am I not being taught how to learn faster? So many things that a human brain can do, but we're not taught these kind of things because we were never meant to do these things. We were only supposed to be subordinates to the British, and in the last 100 and something years, we haven't changed. So that is the problem. Otherwise, a
okay.
lot more of us would be happier, and a lot more of us would be doing things which would bring us so much joy, and we would be doing multiple things.
So you just echoed my words. I'm writing a book and already wrote in that about how we are taught to become cog in the wheel instead of being taught the very basics of human life. We're not taught philosophy. We are not taught communication. We are not taught commerce, accounting, or even doing simple things like political science. We are not taught about politics, even though it governs our life. So you just went on to, completely echo my thoughts as if I was listening to myself. That's good. Anyway, so moving on. You already so established in your field, and there are always these new people who are trying to come in or who are just coming in. What advice will you give to them?
So nothing comes easy. Commitment and conviction is the most important thing. You Because we live in a world where people get bored of things very easily because everything's available at one single swipe. So, for the young people out there who want to do anything with themselves, for that matter, must understand that consistency is the most important word. Write down consistency on your pin board right in front of your study table, desk, wherever you work. Without consistency, nothing will come, because only when you focus for a long time on something that you really want does that flow into your life. It cannot come if you're not spending enough time with it. If you're just looking for instant gratification, you might do something as a fluke for a little while, but there will always be somebody better who will come along tomorrow and you will lose relevance and you will lose what you were doing because you were not able to connect yourself to the profession that you chose. So that's just going to make mediocre bunch of people. So if you want to do something exceptional and if you want to do something for a long time in your life and be happy doing it, you've got to be committed. Anything, whatever you're doing, doesn't matter which field you want to take.
Absolutely. And talking about that, I mean, when I was just listening to you talk, I mean, all through the interview, so I have this image of a very successful person, a person who has been to places, who has done such wonderful things. But then I'm pretty sure that there must have been challenges. There must have been downs. I mean, there were so many ups, but there must have been downs, and you would have had to face them. And that's something which people forget about when they look at somebody successful. They don't really see behind the scenes what went on to make that person reach that pinnacle or whatever that status is. So you must have had your own challenges, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I When I started my career, the first and the
Mm-hmm.
most important thing you need is money. I didn't take any money from my family, or everything that I started my business with was the money that I earned from my first job, and I saved that and I used that. So that's all I had, and I didn't take a loan from the banks. I didn't take money from my family. So it was very difficult, very very difficult. It's extremely challenging because, especially in my industry, there are people who have a lot of backing. People come from backgrounds where they are already in the business, either exporting or maybe from a designer's family, or I mean, not everybody, of course, but there are lots of people who come from a space where there are less number of challenges. So when you don't have money, then you can't publicize yourself because again, this is an industry where you need to be out there for people to know you and see your work and to be able to spot you, right? So you have to be relevant and you have to be present. And to be present, you
Mm-hmm.
need like a public relations company to start talking about you and telling people that you exist. And magazines should be carrying your work, or you should be on television channels, and now on social media, you should be everywhere on social media and stuff. So I did not have the means to do any of this, like not none of it, because it was just such an organic process when I started. So, but conviction and commitment, I think, is what just keeps opening doors, and you just keep meeting the right kind of people, and you just keep doing interesting work, which automatically just draws attention. At least that's what happened to me. I never had to use a public relations person to push me to, to be out there. Um, it, it was just flowing because of the conviction of, that you want to do something with yourself. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you don't have what somebody else has. Everybody's never going to have the same amount of opportunities or ease. You got to find a way. This is how it is. So that's how I figured things out. And I learned everything on ground. I didn't know the first thing about running a business or even starting a business. So I knew nothing. I was 23 years old. So I knew nothing about anything. I just finished NIFT and I just worked for a little while for a company. And so, I learned everything on the way. It's been a fun journey.
And looking back on your journey, what do you think is your most significant contribution?
Um, I think I think people have started understanding that you can create your own language
Mm-hmm.
without fear. You can be yourself and not worry about having to follow the herd. You, I think I think the first thing that happened with me coming on the scene was that before me, everybody wanted to shun the Indianness of things. It wasn't considered cool. Um, people people thought that being Western was more stylish. People thought that Western was better because then then you're with it. But I was the first person who actually got the Indian street, literally the Indian street on my ramp. Where with my first show, which was called High on Chai, I was inspired by a cup of chai. Now, as an Indian, I think 9 out of 10 people are obsessed with their chai, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever. There are people who get a headache if they don't get their fix of tea every single day at the right time and stuff. So it is such a phenomenon in our country. Um, so I was inspired by just that one cup of chai and how I got the chai wala, the balloon wala, there was a chudi wali, there was a pan wala, there were so many others from literally the streets that were on my ramp. That was the first time. It was a huge, huge coup, I think, and it just changed everything uh, in the sense of even bringing drama to the ramp. Of course, there have been amazing designers who have been many years senior to me in the industry, and they've done phenomenal work. But usually and mostly, drama was only associated with the finale show, which means that if you're doing the last show, the final show of the season, that is the only one which will have that humongous amount of drama. I didn't see very many designers otherwise doing anything very much. I think I did a lot in that space of bringing huge amount of drama. I think I brought in the idea of creating an ambience, not just with the clothes, but with everything, because it's a multi-sensory experience. What you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what's happening around you, everything comes together. So subliminally, everything connects. You may or may not understand it because you're not tuned to know that the sound and the visual have to connect. If I'm showing a certain kind of collection and there's a concept and there is something random playing in the background just because there needs to be music for the girls to walk on the ramp, it doesn't make sense. So we used to create a script based on each collection, each show, and we used to dub it. We used to find people who were right to dub in whatever voice, whatever masculine, feminine, whatever we needed for that particular show, and dub that, find the right kind of music, put it all together, create the layers. And today you have all these softwares on your smartphone. You can do everything on your own. But this is from the beginning when I started. We didn't have these softwares that the musicians use. So you had to find people. And you had to, even for dubbing, you had to go to a studio and do it. Today, I can just stand in a quiet room and just, record myself on my phone, and I can use that very easily. Everything can be done. The background, a little bit of noise can be cut out by the software itself. But at that point, it was harder. So I think I also helped create that whole idea of creating a package. We used to even do a lot of things with what are the things that people will find on their chairs. So when people come to watch the show, for instance, we did a show which was inspired by Hindi cinema. Of course, a lot of my work has been inspired by Hindi cinema, but this particular show was called Sapna Cinema. So this
Mm-hmm.
was it was inspired by how I have a lot of psychedelic dreams. I see colors, I see shapes, and I see designs in my dreams. So I have a very different uh, relationship with dreams. So Sapna Cinema literally was that. And so we created the whole ambience of a theater. So when people came in, they found those, and we're very inspired as a brand with old vintage retro influences. So in those single screen cinemas, how you used to have those popcorn packets, the very old fashioned ones that were yellow and like maybe in the 80s, they used to have these kind of popcorn packets that you would buy. So we created that, we made those packets, we packaged it with our show packaging sticker on it, and we put it on all the chairs. And you had to see how every hoity toity lady, man, person, everybody was like trying to grab an extra packet from an empty seat. It was insane. It was just crazy. Every human being is the same. We may or may not appear to be that, but everybody wants to have these fun things. So we used to do a lot of these things for all our shows. We still do. So this is, I think, these kind of things we created as part of mainstream fashion. Of course, it was already happening. I'm not saying it wasn't, but it became more prominent, and people used to come and watch my shows for the fun, for the excitement, for the drama. It's always been packed. So I think that's one of my contributions. I'll tell you one small little story. So I remember
Mm-hmm.
before one of my shows, uh, so a day before Fashion Week begins, you get access to the show area and you go and you set up your booth, right? Whatever decor you want to do, your garments have to be hung, everything has to be ready. So we were busy
Mhm.
doing our thing. The booth was getting ready. We were putting stuff on the walls, whatever things were happening. So at that time, everybody's busy. Everybody's teams. They all the designers are there. The teams are working. So there are certain set of people that are allowed to come into the space, and like pizza delivery people. So there was one guy I remember. He just walked up to my stall and for whatever reason, he recognized me and he's like, Madam, I really love your shows. I have seen your this show and that show. And he started telling me three, four shows that he has seen on TV. And he said, Ma'am, I come to Fashion Week every year for this first day, which is before Fashion Week begins. And I'm a big fan of yours. And is it possible for me to get a pass for your show? So it was
Mhm.
extremely flattering. People can know me from my universe, but if somebody far removed from my world knows about my work, it is extremely flattering. So there have been a few interesting experiences like this over time, and I did
Mhm.
make sure that I kept an invite for him, and I coordinated between my team and this man, and I gave him the show. I He came and he watched
Lovely.
it. So, so yeah.
That's really lovely. So g- you did so many things, but uh, that changed Indian fashion industry, as you've said, a lot, quite a lot. So, what do you see? I mean, what do you envision? What is going to happen over the years? Mm, is the industry going to be heading towards different kind of space now, or is it going to continue the way it has been continuing?
Um, in what sense? You mean design wise, or I didn't
I mean,
understand?
yeah, design wise, for one, we were talking about sustainability and all that, and ethical practices, for example, like sourcing materials from more sustainable sources, also
Yeah, yeah,
using
absolutely.
recycled material and all that.
So, unfortunately, fashion is one of the most polluting industries on the planet right now. And of
Yeah.
course, there is no way around, circumventing sustainable methods of creating fashion because you don't want the garments to land up in landfills and the chemicals to go in our water sources and the chemical fumes from certain aspects of the fashion process to affect people working in the factories, affecting their skin, affecting their when you breathe in fumes, then it affects your lungs. And so much of other damage happens with chemicals involved. So there is absolutely no way to circumvent sustainability, and people are doing it. Everybody is making efforts, that big or small efforts, depending on who can do what. And as a brand, we for the past many years have been doing a lot of different things in terms of sustainability. We uh, we weave our own fabrics. We don't use polyester. We only use natural fiber. We use natural methods for dyeing. We use as your free dyes. We use natural dyes. So a lot of different things. We're actually also working towards other areas of sustainability where we are promoting crafts. So chicken curry is one of those things that I'm working on right now.
Hmm.
Why it may or may not be understood as part of the sustainable drive, but I think it is very important to understand that crafts are the backbone of our culture and our country. And if we don't take methods to safeguard the crafts, then we may end up just being clones of each other. Then there will be no identity or individuality. So, for example, in chicken curry, you would know, you come from Lucknow, so you would know there is a part of chicken curry which is called daras. So, and of course, you would know the jali work, which is so prominent one of the stitches of chicken curry. Now there are literally no women left in Lucknow or around who are doing daras. A daras is basically when you take two pieces of fabric and you join it in a sort of a patchworky sort of a way with a hand needle. So that means the entire garment, it used to be made just with hand stitching. And you're not just hand stitching and just putting two pieces of fabric and just stitching from behind. You're making a beautiful, intricate design. So on a princess panel, for example, in a kurta, this part of the panel and this part of the panel will be intricately joined with this very intricate hand needlework. So people are not willing to pay the price for something like this because they can't see it. It's not loud enough for people to appreciate the amount of time and effort that goes into it. So there is literally no one who's doing it. Also, jali work. There are very few ladies who do jali work compared to earlier. So people don't think that this is a very lucrative business anymore because either they're doing just really, really random run of the mill embroidery or they are doing nothing in between. There are some designers who have, of course, made chicken curry very famous on an international platform. But how many people can afford that? It's only a select bunch of people that can afford extremely expensive work. So holistically speaking, how are you creating enough work for the industry to have good quality artisans? There are dime a dozen women who are just doing the random rock bottom work, which gets exported or is consumed within the country. But you're not keeping the craft alive for what it should be alive. You're not encouraging good quality work because you're not willing to pay that money. The brands are not willing to take less of a margin. Let's say if a product costs 100 rupees, they want to sell it for 5,000 rupees, but they don't want to
That's
pay
true.
artisan, a little bit extra. So the problem lies with the fact that this middle portion is literally missing. There's just a handful of people who are doing good quality work. So this is part of sustainability. We need to love our culture enough to keep it alive. So there are a lot of things like this that we've been working on. Poster art was one of them, which I started working with many years ago. I think it was my second show. It was called New India Bioscope Company, where
Hmm.
as a little girl, I remember some version of hand painted posters, and I was very very excited by the hand painted posters and the way every image just jumped out of the poster. And then suddenly, over the years, you realize that digitalization just took over, and these guys they just disappeared. So I did a huge long research on that, and I did a show with it, and we created a corpus. We tried to find poster painters, but it had totally gone out for 15 years by the time I got to it and tried to find where those people have gone. They were extremely hurt and they were extremely sour and bitter with how suddenly, because of digitalization, this was art and it just completely went extinct. So we tried in our way to whatever we made with hand painting, we actually hired the children of these artists. We found some artists in Delhi who, of course, were not willing to even speak about it initially, but it took a lot of doing to get them to talk. And there was one particular gentleman who had painted the inaugural poster of Zanjeer poster in Delhi. So,
Hmm.
and he had a bunch others like that. So he had some beautiful stories to tell. And sadly, most of these people, their children, their sons, were in the business of digital printing. So it was on an artistic level kind of sad and heartbreaking that from something which came from passion, where you're using your tactile ability to create art every single day, you're just pressing a button and printing things out. So of course, digitalization is important, and we're moving forward, etc. But there needs to be space for art as well. So we created a corpus and we created a lot of work which was done by these artists and their families because they knew how to do some of it. And we brought together more people, and a large part of what we did would go to the artisans and would go to this corpus so that we could run it for a while for to encourage these artists. And every piece that was made, it went with a tag which had the number of hours mentioned and the name of the artist and his signature. He would write on that card about himself and the time he's taken to create that piece. So there are a lot of things that we've done as part of our sustainability drive, as part of our brand ideology.
Brilliant. I think a lot of it, like you mentioned, our attention span is, becoming shorter, and somewhere within that space, we are trying to own too many things. I mean, earlier we would buy something really nice and would want to treasure it for a longer period of time. Now we just want to buy more stuff. I mean, different stuff. We can't be caught wearing the same thing twice. And I think companies like Shein and fast fashion companies, other companies, they've really, polluted the environment in a lot many ways.
Mhm.
So anyway, what's next for you, Nida? I mean, what can we expect next from Nida Mahmood? What are you working on? You're working on your chicken curry, obviously. You're doing that research, but otherwise, as far as projects go and collaborations go.
Well, there's plenty always going on, but we can only talk about them when we reach a point that we can discuss them. At this point, I can
Mhm.
tell you that we're doing something very exciting with the idea of chicken curry, not just with making some clothes, but to immortalize the craft in whatever way I can. And so we're working towards a very interesting project, which should hopefully we should be ready with it in the next 2 months. So you'll hear about it soon.
Yeah, okay, keeping our fingers crossed. So, before I take your leave and before we wrap it up, what message would you like to convey to your fans, your friends, your followers?
I think just be true to yourself. It does not matter what someone else thinks because you have to do what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And if you don't like it, you'll not be able to sustain yourself. You'll be miserable. You'll make people miserable around you. So it is that much more important to fill your cup before you fill other people's cups. So you have to be consistent about what you want. You have to be sure about what you want. It's very important. For me, I think it is important to write down things. So I write things, and I write them in the sense of what is important to me. So when you start writing
Mhm.
things down, you are making notes for yourself. Things start becoming clear, and when things are clear, then you know what you want to do. So I just think that you should just be true to yourself, nothing else. You don't need anything beyond that. Everything else will just come to you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Nida. That was really awesome. It was lovely chatting with you, and you are really an inspiration. And you just summed it up so beautifully, actually, what you just said. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
taking out time for us.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you for
And
talking.
so we were just talking to Nida Mahmood, the Queen of Kitsch. I mean, media loves her, we love her. Her designs have been an inspiration. And really glad that she could take out time for us. So we'll be meeting again next week, next Sunday with a different guest. Thank you so much for being here. And bye, Nida. Lovely
Bye
to
bye.
have this session with you. Thank you. Bye bye. Good
Thank you
night.
very much. Good night.